Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for another episode of American Mood Swings, where we talk about the brain and all things mental health. Our guest today for the show is Hannah, who is a fire instructor in North Carolina. She teaches situational awareness and firearms training for women. And as she became known as the tactical stylist on LinkedIn, and we're just going to learn all about her background, and her mission of empowering women, making them feel more safe. I felt that this was a great time for this discussion as people are sending their daughters away to college for the first time, and just for women who live alone that don't even think about safety. It's a really important topic. There was a very high profile case recently in the news that Brian Kohlberg, the four children in Idaho that were sadly killed a couple years ago, but it's been on my mind. I just felt like it's really important to talk about safety. And so thank you, Hannah. And
Thank you.
why don't we start with just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came up with this ideal of starting of a firearms training for women.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Colorado. I was born to a poor ranch family on a large ranch. So we were land rich and pocket poor. But I didn't know any better. And, I always tell people because they're like, how did you get into situational awareness? And I'm like, well, growing up on a ranch, you always had to be situationally aware. You could get bit by a rattlesnake, kicked by a horse, trampled by a cow, or beat up by your siblings. Like, it was endless. And so we ran our cattle and sheep on 95,000 acres in the mountains during the summer. So my father always made sure that we were situationally aware. We were aware of our environment, our surroundings, the weather, and that we knew how to survive if we got lost because it could take them a day or two to find us if we got lost.
Wow.
So, we lived in that mindset. We didn't know any better. And I'm grateful for that. And so as a child, I lived in my imagination. And since I was itty bitty, I loved dressing myself. I loved fashion. I would go ride my horse bareback and I'd wear my mom's super long wedding dress cape that she
Oh my
kept.
God.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was huge. It could flow over the back of my horse. I always had to make sure my horses were not spooking at it, but I would ride in dresses. I'd play in creeks in dresses. And so I always had that feminine side, but I was always picturing myself as a warrior princess. And that's just carried on through my life. I was a professional extreme sports athlete. And even in that business of free ride mountain biking, I always wanted to carry forward the feminine spirit because even in that, it was a very male dominated sport. And then guns were always a way of life growing up on a ranch. We always were shooting rifles and protecting our livestock and dealing with prairie dogs. And pistols were all over our house for safety purposes because we lived in the middle of nowhere. But I never really got trained in firearms. And that's what I see today is there's a lot of 2A individuals in America who are raised around guns, but who have never been properly trained around firearms. And so that's why I sit here today as this firearms instructor, also known as the tactical stylist, because my love for the feminine spirit, my love for fashion, and my appreciation for firearms and the safety that they can provide if you're properly trained just kind of culminates together to make who I am today, which is Fem9, and then also known as the tactical stylist.
Oh, is Fem9, would you call that is that your company name, Fem9?
Yeah, so Fem9 is my name for the company that's more geared towards the education of women
Okay.
and the products for women in training in situational awareness and, some of the less lethal tools and then my fashion apparel line.
Well, oh, I love that. That we'll have to get into that. And
Yeah.
so it was very interesting because yesterday I was at the gym, just telling someone, she's always asking me about the podcast, and I told her I was interviewing you and a gun safety expert, and I mean, but I could tell, and I'm in Los Angeles, so it's very like hippie, but there's a very big like anti-gun, we don't need guns, but. And she said, like, she even was telling me, I think she's in real property management. And I guess she mentioned a situation where somebody was threatening her boss years ago, and he wanted to have a gun in the office, and she was like, "No, no, 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 I'm not going to come if you have a gun." And I just looked at her and said, "Well, I come from a different place. I have been in three armed robberies, and I really hadn't thought about them in a long time since the first one was at 19. I went to a gas station super early in the morning, which was unusual. I was just going to school early to study for a test. But long story short, it turned out the guy put a shotgun in my face. So I thought I was going to be killed. He had just robbed it. I happened to arrive right as he had just he had the owner and someone else tied up. So luckily, so, then a few years later, he ended up getting caught. He had robbed, like, he was a disgruntled employee who had robbed 16 gas stations in the Bay Area. Then a few years later, I was in college in San Diego in La Jolla, which is a very affluent, nice area in San Diego, in California. And I walked into a Rite Aid late at night with my mom, like right around closing time. It was an after Christmas sale, and somebody came in to rob the store. And it's just wrong place, wrong time. Took me as a hostage, put a gun to my head. And I thought for sure, he's not wearing a mask. This is it. It's over. I'm going to die tonight. And then he let me go, the cash register. So in those situations, like having a gun on me wouldn't have, it happened so quickly, but it's made me a lot more open to the idea of having one in a home. And I've just gone up and down and never have followed through. And finally, just this last year, I went, like in January, I was in Hawaii and my friends. I said, I want to go to a gun range. And will you guys take me? I don't know if I will. Well, actually, I did hit a couple gun stores here in Los Angeles in a place called Burbank. I have my brother's little revolver that he left here, and but I didn't know who was registered. So I took it to the gun store. They said we can't, sell you bullets. You have to find out who it's registered. They were encouraging me to they said, well, we'll take this gun. Why don't you just buy a Glock? But I didn't know. I didn't know if I want a big gun, a little gun.
Yep.
So when anyway, my friends took me shooting, but just I don't think that I think it's a good idea to have one in the head. Well, it all depends on the person. You'll talk about that, but I was curious if you have ever been the victim of a violent crime. I'm just curious, or no.
So I never have been the victim of a violent crime, and it's fascinating to hear that you've had two instances of that. I love to live in the world of energy. I know some people aren't into that, but I study some weird things like Vedic astrology and stuff like that. I'm
Ooh,
fascinated by the world of energy.
okay.
And, you know, it sounds like this is a path that your life was supposed to take,
Oh my goodness.
because you're going to educate people on these things, right? So I'm somebody that I've been close to violent encounters, but I have to say that my training prevented some pretty bad things from happening. Now, when it comes to firearms, you're smart to say that the likelihood that you would have been able to access a firearm in those moments happening so fast could have been very slim, right? Without some serious training in those situations. That's very smart. Um, you know, and that's what I really want to educate women on is even if you don't want to carry a firearm, situational awareness needs to be something that women begin to understand, but you can't be situationally aware unless you become self-aware.
Mm.
You have to be self-aware to really be able to read the body language, to read the environments that you're in, to know
Ooh.
what's an anomaly and know what's not an anomaly. It's a very dynamic skill that we've lost touch with in our society, whether it's from religion or, societal shaming, culture shaming, anything like that. We can lose our ability to listen to ourselves when it comes to safety.
We're going to get into a situation after both of those times. I mean, it was so long ago. The first one was at 19, then the other one was like at 23. But my dad would pull me aside and say, honey, you do a lot of you put yourself, well, when I was at the same time, I just chose to do like graveyard security during junior college because it made me study. There was not, but he was so upset. He's like, it's just dangerous. You're out late at night but with the robberies, he would say you have to things that I never thought about. And I'm like, well, I can't live that way. I can't be paranoid. But he'd say, don't. I would study like in an isolated donut shop, like a Winchell's,
Mm.
because they're open late and I could never study at home. And he'd be like, don't be in isolated. Don't go. to like stores on a Monday morning, like when the gas station thing happened. He said because that's when people have all this money after the weekend and they're doing bank deposits at
Yep.
stores. The other robbery, like in San Diego, it was closing time. He would just say you have to be mindful. These are prime. I mean, although now in LA because they legalize shoplifting, there's like stores are robbed in broad daylight, 50 people come. But back then, he just told things I never thought about. He'd be like, don't go to a store at closing. Don't go on a Monday morning at 5 o'clock when they're emptying, you know. And
Yep.
I, again, if you're like, I don't even think about that kind of stuff. But anyway, Situal, let's talk about your training and what's involved and people that are one thing I learned from listening to you on another podcast is that you are very open about like not everyone is ready for a concealed permit. It takes time, but let's just talk about the process and how people come to you and what's involved in it and things like that.
Yeah. So the way that I function, I always tell people it's about so much more than guns. Guns is just a tool that can actually help me tap into the mental, emotional, and physical well-being of an individual. So, one of the things that I will utilize, so all of my classes, for the most part, are all private. I try to get students
Oh,
to do private training with me. Occasionally, I'll teach some larger groups, like I'm teaching a family of 4 this weekend.
oh,
Uh,
nice.
but I like it if they know each other. And it's not that I won't teach group classes, but I really try to teach individual classes where it's personal one-on-one because every individual has their own unique story. Every individual has their own traumas, they have their own fears, and I need to be able to move intuitively with that individual. You're always going to get more out of a private lesson than you are a group lesson because of that sort of mentality. Now, I work heavily with the nervous system. So you're talking about, mind and body health and stuff like that. So I look at firearms training from a biological point of view. It's not personal, it's biology. And guns trigger the nervous system. They trigger first the sympathetic response. There's fear, there's anxiety. Anybody that's like, "Oh no, no guns." They're reacting from a sympathetic state, you know?
Mm.
When I put a gun into a new shooter's hand, they're shaking, their palms are sweaty, their pupils are dilated, their breathing is shallow, their heart rate is racing because they're in the sympathetic state. Two things we're born afraid of: loud noises and being dropped. And we have this loud noise exploding in our hands and by our face, it's obviously going to trigger the sympathetic state. So I love to work with students where I've had them do cold plunging with me sometimes, depending
Oh,
on the
wow.
trauma that they're coming from. They'll
Okay.
do cold plunging with me because I use the cold plunge to teach them about their nervous system. I teach them about breath work. I teach them about how to cope with stress, especially on the gun range. Then we go to the gun range. And on the gun range, I'm able to tie in everything they learned through cold plunging with the firearm. The firearm is just another cold plunge tool to tap
Wow.
into the nervous system. So then we start working through the sympathetic state, and I finally get them to the parasympathetic state, which is where we breathe, we rest, we calm down, and then we learn. So my goal is to get them to that parasympathetic state as fast as possible, because then that's when they start understanding what I'm saying. That's when they can start feeling the gun in their hands. That's when it becomes fun. And then that's where we make tremendous progress. And so that's a huge part of my method. Now, I can't always do the cold plunge. It just depends on the student. It depends on the day. It depends on the cost that they're willing to pay because those more in-depth classes do cost more money because they take longer. But
I love it. I love it.
my students are still, each student, I have yet to have a student leave disappointed because I focus so heavily on them that they walk away feeling confident, they walk away feeling empowered, they walk away with knowledge of how to cope with daily stress. Even if they leave my class and never shoot a gun again, they walked away with something that can transform their life as they move forward. So I just recently trained a woman who survived the Las Vegas shooting.
Oh,
And yeah, and it was an incredible journey with her. We did heart, mind, breath coherence when we got to the range. And it was a very intimate journey in the beginning for her. We walked her back through the situation, and while we're sitting on the gun range and she's doing this meditation, gunshots are going off in the background, which is what I wanted because I'm trying to rewire her nervous system to tell a different story around hearing those gunshots and around coping with the PTSD that she's been struggling with. By the end of the day, when we first started shooting, out of all of my students, she shook the worst out of any student I've ever had
Mm.
because she's so traumatized from the experience and she was shaking. But I kept talking to her about the biology. This is the sympathetic state. Let's get you to the parasympathetic state. Stay with the fear, right? Don't run from the fear. Stay with the fear. And then by the end, the last words out of her mouth before the we packed everything up was, "This is so much fun." I mean, she was out of all my students so far, she was probably one of the few that I can honestly say is ready to conceal carry mentally, physically, emotionally. It was a transformative day for her. And to this day, I just met with her last week. She told me that what she learned has changed her life because now she's able to cope with those moments when the PTSD kicks in and she's able to practice the breathing that I taught her and the tools that I taught her regardless of having a gun in her hand. So, that's a bit of my method with the firearms side. The situational awareness side, I'll pause so that you can ask any questions if you
Oh.
want, and then we could talk about the situational awareness.
Oh, well, it just made me, when I went to the gun range, it was very reflective for me because many years ago, my dad was a hunter growing up, and it was before all the mass shootings, so he always kept his guns in his room in like a gun cabinet. And then as he got sicker, he gave his guns away to my three brothers. Well, one had felonies, so he couldn't, but the other two, well, they can't have a gun.
I get it. Yeah,
But
totally.
I asked him, and he's like, he would not give me a gun. And he said, honey, I know you think I'm being chauvinistic and sexist, but it's not that. He said, you're my daughter, and I know you. I don't think that you would be able to shoot someone. I just don't. I think they would get it and kill you. And I couldn't live with myself. He said, just keep yourself out of dangerous situations. But that was like, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. So then just this January when I was in Hawaii and my friends took me shooting, it was I liked it, but like you said, it was the nervous system. It was a lot louder. I'm never around guns. It was a lot louder than I thought. We were in like an indoor gun range in
Oh
Waikiki.
yeah, that's even worse.
It
Yeah.
was really loud, and I think my body was kind of shaking. They brought long guns and a small gun, so I could try both. I definitely decided I would go with a smaller gun. I think the bigger guns, but it was just there was a part of me that was like it felt maybe because I've never shot a gun before. There was a part of me, Hannah, that was just like this feels very unnatural
Yeah,
because I'm
100%.
it felt for me, I bet you grew up on a ranch and if you're handling them, but for someone like, I guess, a city girl or kind of hit now, I would say I'm hippy dippy, but because I've been in all these violent crimes, like and I live alone, I would feel better. But it was just interesting. Like you said, it was a lot louder. And all I kept thinking about while we were shooting is how terrifying it must be for somebody like what just happened yesterday in Minneapolis when there's a mass shooting. Um, how loud it is and how scary because I wasn't around guns and it was just but I left thinking I want to come back. It's just expensive. Like here where I live, well there we were just there like an hour and a half. We both shot. We all three of us shot three different times and you could not you can't bring your own bullets. They had brought ammunition, but you have to, apparently the law in Hawaii is you have to buy it there for liability reasons. But anyway, it was definitely like 250 for everything for the hour. And I'm like, wow, well, I want to come back. It's a little pricey. I wish maybe I'll find an outdoor range. But anyway, I'd love to know about the cost and how many times people come. And then you also talk about like it's not a one-time thing. Like once you learn how to use a gun and all these tools, we'll get into like pepper spray and all these things like you got to practice once in a while and use them. Otherwise, if they just sit there and then something does come up and you're fumbling or nervous. But let's yeah, what's the cost or I mean, yeah, I want to promote your business, but what's
Thank
the
you.
cost for someone to come?
So I train at outdoor ranges.
Oh,
I will train at an indoor range if somebody is totally comfortable with it, and that's the only option we have. But I train at outdoor ranges for that sympathetic response, right? Because indoor it's much louder. When I go to indoor ranges and somebody's shooting a rifle in the bay next to me, uncontrollably my body jerks every single time they're shooting around, right? Because the noise travels. So, I go to an outdoor range here. It's $50 entry fee to get into the range to shoot, and that's all day.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful range, absolutely beautiful range. As a trainer, I have access to private bays. So like I said, I always do private lessons with my students. And to do a full private day is $450. And so that's really not bad. And then the cost of ammo, right? So ammo, you're looking anywhere from about 12 to $14. I don't make people buy the ammo from the gun range. You know, if they have their own gun, they can bring their own ammo. If they're shooting my guns, I just ask that they purchase decent ammo because there is cheap ammo that can be more harsh on your firearms.
Okay.
And so, I'll have them purchase 600 to 800 rounds because that's about what I'll have a student shoot their first day, which is a lot, but it's my process for getting them through the fear. So all up, they're looking at about for an entire day of shooting. They can be looking at about 650 to 700 for an entire day of shooting
Okay.
for on average, but they're going to get so much more out of that class than they would anywhere else. Now, my concealed carry classes, um, typically I expect that people have already been shooting when they signed up for a concealed carry class. Oftentimes that's not the case. Sadly, I wish more people would learn before they go try to get a concealed carry permit. But my concealed carry classes are 350, and it's actually a really good deal for people. So the first day is all the legal portion in North Carolina, right? So you have to be a North Carolina resident to get this class. And you'll sit all day, learn the laws, learn situational awareness, learn the things that I'm required to teach. And then we'll plan a day where you come out and privately train with me. And so that costs 350. And typically, as you heard, most of my students, I tell them by the end of class, they're not ready to carry.
Mm.
Not gonna fluff people up, and I'm not gonna allow people just to come into my class, hand money in return for a certificate to say you can conceal carry. Because if that individual gets in a situation and they have to use their firearm and they get called into a court of law, I'm also going to get called in because I certified them and they're going to want to know what I teach, and so I'm proud of my classes. I'm proud of my process. I'm proud of what I put people through, but it's also very important to me that I give people the honest truth that you're not ready to conceal carry. You need more training.
California, at least at the gun store in Burbank, they said we have some of the strictest laws. When I was trying to buy ammo a couple of years ago to go to the gun range,
Mhm.
and practice, like, do I want? Because I didn't want to buy a gun without trying different ones, because
Smart.
they're expensive. But they said we have some of the strictest laws in the whole country. So I don't even know about how it works in California. But I wouldn't even start with wanting to do that. Just I'd like to have one well, I have one here, but it's a revolver, but
Yeah.
I don't even
Better
have
than nothing.
bullets. I don't know how to use it.
Right.
Like at the store, they were saying you should try to get a Glock, but my other men have said, or friends have, I don't know any females that talk about guns or even, I'm sure that some own them. That's very interesting. But anyway, they were like, you might want to just keep that revolver because the Glocks can have problems themselves and revolvers. I should have brought it down, but I'm not going to take the time to go get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
if you have, I don't know what kind of revolver it is, or what caliber of revolver it is. The thing about revolvers, I don't teach classes with revolvers because typically I want to move people into the semi-automatic pistol, which is your Glock, right?
okay. Okay.
So Glock is just a brand of pistol. So I shoot Glocks. That's my typically my go-to, and that's just me, right? That's just because that's what I have. It's kind of like a computer. Once you get into a MacBook, you're kind of like stuck with a MacBook, because you buy all the stuff for it, right?
Yeah.
And so it can be the same thing in the gun world. There are there are, you know, Jeep Grand Cherokees of the gun world, and then there's your Ferraris of the gun world, and then there's your Cadillacs of the gun world. Like different gun companies, different styles of guns are going to be shoot differently for different reasons, right? And so it's smart that you want to test things out. Revolvers don't have malfunctions like semi-automatics do. Semi-automatics are going to have more malfunctions, and you're going to have to learn how to deal with those things like misfires. You're going to have to learn how to deal with mag reloads, tactical reloads, stovepipes, double feeds, things that can go wrong in your firearm. You have to know how to deal with them. Revolvers don't have hardly any failures, any malfunctions. They can, but typically I haven't seen many. And so that's the thing about a revolver. It's just the only thing is you're only getting 5 to 6 rounds typically. And with a semi-automatic pistol, except for in California, you're typically going to get anywhere from 12 to 19 rounds in a
Oh,
semi-automatic pistol.
okay.
So you have way more capacity to deal with a situation with a semi-automatic pistol, but they are more work.
Okay.
People misunderstand the registration side. Um, and so that's interesting with California because, I can take those guns and, I can get them registered to myself and sell them,
Oh,
because I've had them for a long time. So it's fascinating to me, but I typically tell people like don't sell guns unless you have to. My thing is if I sell a gun, I buy a gun. I keep gun money and gun money.
mm,
And so having a revolver is not a bad idea, even if you decided to move forward with getting a semi-automatic pistol at some point. You may shoot that revolver, and I know a lot of people that carry a revolver as a backup gun, because you're going to press the trigger and it's going to go bang, typically. Once again, it just kind of depends on the revolver that it is.
okay. Let's talk about the you have something called mocktails and mace events that really look fun and interesting. If you
Yeah.
want to talk about those and the importance of training and like the difference between mace and pepper spray, because I don't know. I think I bought pepper spray at like a big 5 years ago. It's just been sitting in my car, never used it. So let's talk about your training and the difference between those and why it's important to
Yeah.
train with those.
So mocktails and mace, I always let people know I travel. Like I'm not just locked into North Carolina. So if there's any individuals out there, any women that want to put together a group of women and all I ask is, you pay for my accommodation and travel and then, put together a decent class and I come and I do mocktails and mace. And so I quit drinking alcohol about almost 3 years ago. And so I love incorporating that in my situational awareness training. It's not that I have anything against anybody drinking alcohol, but for me, it was a problem. And one of the best decisions I ever made was to move away from alcohol. So now I love just introducing people to mocktails. It's just a fun way to have a safe environment while we talk about, safety. And so the mace part is where I get into teaching women about the tools they can use for self-defense that are not firearms. So in my course, I talk about situational awareness. I talk about body language because it's so important that we learn to read body language, right? And this comes into like, for instance, if you looked back at those situations when you pulled into that gas station,
Mm.
maybe there's a behavior that the individual was showing right before you pulled in. Maybe he was acting erratically, throwing his hands, doing something shady, right? We have to learn to read body language the same way that animals read body language. And we've lost touch with that, right? Whether, like I said, through religion and other issues that have caused us to stop paying attention to those things. So I talk about body language. We talk about even your own personal posture, right? What makes a hard target? What makes a soft target? Talk about, the ways to set your home up, for instance, to be a hard target or a soft target home.
Mm.
Little things like if you're a single woman living in a home, a single family home like I am, finding a pair of old work boots and putting those work boots outside your house, right?
Yeah, I've done
Because
that kind of stuff before when I house sat for people and I was
there
there
you
by
go.
myself and they thought it was silly, but I'm like, no, I want it to look like a guy's here, you know. I
Absolutely.
That's so smart. That's so
Yeah,
smart.
that's so smart that you did that because I drive a big truck, right? So it automatically puts out a vibe of a man being here. And then I have two teenage boys, and so like there's products of them out front. There's things that say a man lives here, and criminals value their safety as much as you value yours.
Yeah.
There's the occasional criminal that doesn't, right? And that's your psychopath. But most people want to get home safe at the end of the night, even the criminal that's just wanting to break in and steal your Xbox, you know? So creating environments that give off a strong vibe is important, just as much as your posture when you walk down the street, your awareness that our heads aren't in our cell phones. All that stuff matters. And then I talk to women even about their menstrual cycle, right? Because you cannot be situationally aware if you are not self-aware.
Okay.
And we have to understand our own personal biology. And our menstrual cycle affects us deeply. It affects people's attraction to us at certain times of the month. It affects our mood. It affects our energy levels. And if we're aware of even the way that we're feeling, it can allow us to navigate the world in a better way and to not put ourselves in certain situations based upon even our hormonal stability at the time of the month, right? So I love talking to women about that. And then we go into, I talk about sex trafficking because a lot of people don't understand sex trafficking. It's not the movie Taken. About 10% of the sex trafficking incidents in America are more like Taken. That's very few. 90% of sex trafficking in the United States is very covert. It's very, it's the house next door who, could be your daughter's best friend. You never know how this is happening. It's a very covert process. So I educate people on what this is, what it looks like, and how to see it and prevent it and fight it. And then protect your children. And then we go out and talk about mace, right? We talk about the Byrna, which is the less lethal launcher that I sell to women. It looks like a gun, but it is not a gun. It's a device that shoots pepper ball rounds. It shoots kinetic rounds. Okay. We'll get into that here in a minute. But mace and pepper spray. So the difference with pepper spray is it's capsicum, right? It's like going into your kitchen and putting pepper into a liquid form and throwing it on your face. It's going to burn and it's going to burn severely. But mace has more of the chemical component, right? More of the tear gas component. So it's a little more savage. Now, I don't know. California does have laws against certain types of mace being used.
Oh,
So leave it to California to dictate that. But I sell certain maces that I cannot sell to California people because they don't allow it. So it's the stuff that has the tear gas in it and the chemical component. But I can sell you pepper spray.
okay.
So that's the difference. It's just a little less potent. Um, so what I do is a lot of women carry mace, but they've never sprayed a can of mace. And typically women carry two different styles of maces. They carry the little tiny one that is on a keychain that has like a flip lock and you spray it, or they carry the little bit bigger one that it's like a thumb lock. And so I teach women how to spray these by using inert cans of mace. So they're cans of mace, but they're inert, which means they're just a liquid that has no burning power. It has no stopping power. And I allow women to spray those, to flip the safeties, spray them. I teach them how to spray, how to move their hands. We get them close and move them further away because women need to understand when you're carrying mace, especially those small cans, there's not much to a small can.
Oh,
Uh, Typically, they're going to spray in a bit of a jet form, and you need to make sure and understand that there could be backsplash. If you're
oh,
really close,
I've never heard
that's
of it.
going to come back on you and
Oh,
it's going to burn. And so women need to understand this stuff, right? So typically when I have women spray the small cans, a lot of them are like, man, I'm never going to carry a small can of mace. Then I have them spray the larger cans, the little bit larger 2 ounce cans, far more shooting power. I mean, you're looking at, 10 to 12 feet distance versus the 3, 4, 5, 6 foot distance. Because distance is your friend. As a woman, you want to get away, right? You want to try not to have to fight. And so you're trying to create distance and give yourself time to get away. So with these other maces, there's more juice in the larger cans of mace. So they get to test this stuff out. And it's really fun to watch the shock and awe, and it's really fun to watch them feel confident in it when they leave. And then I pull out the Byrna less lethal launcher, and the ladies get to shoot the Byrna, and they get to know what it feels like. So it shoots these little balls that are pepper or they're mace. There's two different types. But when we shoot these, they're kinetic or they're trainer rounds. So it's just like a baby powder ball. So when it hits the hard target, it explodes into this powder, and it shows you as if it was the chemical irritant mace that would be more detrimental, how it would affect somebody. And so they get to press the trigger, they get to feel how it shoots, they get to load the gun, and work through the feeling of this. And it's a great device for people. I'm sitting here kicking myself that I didn't have one. I have one in my car. I can run and get it if we want to edit that out. But um, these devices shoot up to 400 feet per second, which is cooking. That's fast with a kinetic ball or a pepper ball round. And they shoot up to 5 rounds in one sitting. And then they shoot up to 60 feet.
Oh,
So a woman can have plenty of time to get away and create distance from a threat. And I love these. So when I train a woman that's not ready to conceal carry with a firearm,
yeah.
this is the next thing that I encourage her to carry. I carry one. My 17-year-old son has one in his car because kids are threatened all the time in their vehicles.
Yeah.
And so he has one in his vehicle, and I've trained him on it. And then on days where I can't conceal carry, because maybe I'm going into the mall, right? Maybe I'm going into somewhere I can't carry a firearm, I will conceal carry my Byrna. So this is typically the can of mace that women will carry. It's a very small can. It's got the flip top
Okay.
safety. And so teaching women how to use this stuff, I have videos that I show women in my situational awareness class where a woman was trying to spray a man, but she didn't know how to unlock the safety because she'd never trained in it. She'd never practiced it, right? So that's why it's really important that women train with these items, that they practice before they carry them. And then this is the larger can of mace, and it's a flip top safety. This is typically the one that I encourage women to carry. It is larger, but there are devices that you can get that'll stick it to your hand and stuff. But I do recommend one of these when you carry mace. And then this is the Byrna less lethal launcher. So it's CO2 driven. So inside of here is a little CO2 cartridge. And then inside here is the magazine. And you'll see that red ball right there. That's a kinetic round. And so I have right now I have 5 kinetic rounds pretty much in this pistol for specific purposes. And it doesn't recoil, right? It's not a gun. This is legal in all 50 states, including California. You
Okay.
just can't carry the OC rounds, the chemical component rounds, but you can carry the pepper ball rounds, right? So it's just the normal pepper spray. It's a powder form, so it doesn't dry out. You don't have to worry about that. But if I press this trigger, it's going to fire one of those rounds out at 400 feet per second, and it's going to do damage to my wall. It would indent and potentially break through the drywall. So it's giving you an opportunity to get away,
Okay.
right? These
Great.
are a really powerful tool for women to carry.
Well, I wanted to just mention, since we're talking about again, I'm just bringing up the Idaho thing. It's just very sad, but I just want anybody listening to this know, because now there's been some documentaries, and the guy who killed these 4 people, he had been staking out the house for months. They have lots of video, but the girls had come home a few weeks. What I just learned in a documentary, they had come home a few weeks before, and a door was wide open, so they were walking through the house with a golf club. But he had been looking at them through windows that had no curtains or blinds for weeks. And the girls would say to their friends, like, God, I feel like someone's out there watching me. I'm not sure, but all of these things that were like warnings, it made me think of a book. Many years ago, there was a man, who wrote a book. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, called The Gift of Fear. I saw him on Oprah. And for anyone
Gavin
who's okay, so yeah, anybody who's never heard of this, and the gist of the book is that women get like these girls in Idaho, they got a feeling like we all get these feelings, all animals do, like cats will hiss and dogs will growl and bite and snakes. But he said women dismiss these feelings. Like those girls, they came home, the door's unlocked, they're walking around. But as a couple weeks, this guy walked in their house at 4 in the morning to just wide. I mean, the door was unlocked. He just walked in and he had been there, so he probably knew all the doors were unlocked. But little things like locking your doors. I know now the thing with real estate, people don't put drapes, especially in rural areas. But drapes and curtains are a great idea. The sticks in the doors, and especially with young girls going off, because I mean, he probably would have found a way if he was as crazy as he was. But maybe not. I mean, just something as simple as locking your doors at night and no one. I had an older brother, Brent. Haven't seen him in a while, but I moved a lot during college, and he every time he's not more street smart than me, kind of a biker guy, just way more street smart. And every time he'd visit me, Hannah, he was the first thing he'd do, he'd be like, chick, because I always like ground level apartments, and they tell women to get higher, but I like ground level. But he'd put locks on all my windows, put the sticks in the doors, put motion lights outside, and things that I just didn't think about. But now with more and more crime, especially this Idaho thing is just really haunting me, knowing how easy it was for him to get in, and that there were all these warning signs like that that might have said, if you come home and you find your door unlocked, start locking the door, let's do something. But anyway, I'm glad you've heard about it. You mentioned a book. What was it called? Violence of Mind. I heard you on another podcast. So what's the gist of that book?
So, I've listened to a lot of books, so I love Gavin DeBecker's book. It's on my all my classes at the end. I have books I recommend, and his book is definitely one of my number ones.
Yeah.
Right? Fear is a gift. There's different kinds of fear. There's the biological fear that Gavin DeBecker talks about, right? The hair standing up, right? The feeling that someone's watching you, the feeling that you need to get out of somewhere or not go somewhere, right? There's a gift of fear, but then there's the egoic fear. The egoic fear that is afraid to do something because you might get embarrassed and you might fail, right? So we got to learn to see the difference. And that's a huge thing for me with women is you've got to get back in touch with your intuition. You have to begin to learn to listen to yourself and embrace your dark side. That's what I tell women in my situational awareness class because whether it's virtue signaling, society shaming, the shaming that happens from religions, whatever it is. I lost touch with my intuition for a long time and I had a strong intuition as a child. Um, and now I'm back in touch with that and I'm learning to listen to it and I'm learning like where does it speak for me, right? Is it in your belly? Is it in your heart? Like where do you feel your intuition? You have to develop that stuff. But the book Violence of Mind, um, it it's what is the guy's name? I forgot his name. Um, it's a very strange name, but
I'll find it
he,
and we'll
he
put it in.
came from violence, right? So there's other books called On Killing and On Combat, and they're written by Lieutenant Colonel Grossman. Phenomenal books that talk about the mindset of the human around killing people. 20% of the world's population is truly designed to go to war and not have a problem pressing the trigger. Everyone else, no, we're not designed for it. But he gets into the psychology and the biology. It's amazing. But you move to Violence of Mind, and his name is Varg Freeman, I think it is. Uh, you move into his story, and he came from a violent background. He came from white trash, drug family, drug addicts, biker gang style stuff, like terrible, terrible situations. He had a man try to kill him and his mom when he was 6 years old, and he tells the story quite graphically. So all he knew was violence. At 17 years old, he was defending himself and he stabbed a guy, I think it was like 23 times. And he relives the entire story and the guy didn't die and he was defending himself.
God.
I believe him. And anyways, he spent years in prison and he just brings a reality to the table that so many people have not thought about, and it brought an excellent balance to even my mindset, because he gets at it from a criminal point of view. And in any situation, if anybody is going to fight back, you have to be ready to become very violent to fight back. You just do. In that situation, if those girls would have listened to their intuition, right? But they silenced it. Whether it was that they didn't have parents telling them, listen to that, or somebody telling them, maybe they avoided gory news stories. Maybe they avoided, movies or stories about these things. Because what happens inside of our society is we think that if we don't hear about it and we don't pay attention to it, it's not going to happen, right? And I know that there's a bit of that in the religious background because I grew up in a very religious home. And so I would block all those things, I would pray that over these things, but yet I would ignore signs and intuitions telling myself that, oh, God will protect me, or oh, no, they're good people. I'm supposed to love everybody. And I would ignore the signs. And then I would find myself realizing I screwed up later. That because I ignored my intuition screaming at me, like that is the voice of God. Your intuition is the voice of God. So, um, in that situation, if those girls would have known to pay attention to that, then they might have been more prepared to fight back when he showed up in their house at 4 o'clock in the morning. It could have been that they did have the door locked, so maybe he had to rattle something or break a window to get in. You know what I mean? Like there could have been ways that they could have fought back with violence and protected themselves. I know a lot of women, and I got to meet quite a few this last week because I'm working with a group called Women for Gun Rights. And numerous of these ladies that I met had violent encounters where a man tried to rape them. And one of them used a firearm to get away from the guy. And that's when she started training more. So she wasn't even proficient with the use of her firearm, but she still was able to use the firearm to get away from the guy. And she did. And so she dedicated her life to becoming a police officer and to training.
Well, I kept thinking about these two survivors too. There were two girls. One was downstairs. She slept through it all, didn't know anything. But there was the one witness. And so she had come out of her room, Hannah. I'm sure you probably heard all this, but she came out of her room. Oh, she had the girl that survived. And she was like, she thought she was hearing things. She opened her door. She was like, I must be hearing things. I'm not. She got a little scared. She closed her door. Then a short time later, and this all happened within 10 minutes. He was in and out of that house he killed four people in less, it was 10 minutes. Came in at like 4:10. He was out of there by 4:20 something. It was crazy. And I only know this from watching the documentary. But this gal, so she opened her door a second time and he walked by. He had a mask on and she was terrified and she shut the door. But it's a miracle she didn't get killed. I think he was just in a hurry. What I've been thinking about it again and why it was so exciting to meet you, like, let's say she hears this, they're way out in the middle of nowhere. I don't know how long it would have taken the police if they didn't call the police till the next day, like 12 hours went by. They just all went to sleep. She didn't even want to go upstairs. Her and another girl, they called a male friend of theirs. They're like, we can't reach anybody upstairs. And something weird happened last night. They were too scared. So they called a guy. He came over, he went upstairs and said, don't go up there. But anyway, but I couldn't help but think, okay, what if her room might have been next, if she hadn't interrupted him or whatever, and if she didn't have a single weapon, even this thing that what did you call it, the Burke? I mean,
Byrna.
Byrna, anything. And now in that, again, because I've been in a couple robberies, you do kind of freeze up and you're panicking and you're not rational. But let's say she had been able to stay rational. She's in her room, like, what do I do to protect myself? She probably didn't have any weapon on her, nothing. And he could have very easily, and the girl downstairs. So it's a miracle. But anyway, I'm going to stop bringing that up. But it's just so, there's so many things that might have helped them. And anyway, but
There is, and when I teach my situational awareness classes, a lot of people think that it's a self-defense class, and they think they're going to come and learn some, martial arts chop or some move that's going to keep them safe. And I warn people with a lot
Like,
of that stuff because it's good to take the classes and get the awareness of what's possible, but it can also be dangerous, right? It's the same thing with a gun. You can go out and take one class and learn how to shoot a gun and never shoot a gun again, and your mindset's still down at the low level. So there's a saying in the gun world that says you will never rise to the level of your expectation, but you will fall to the level of your training,
mm,
which means you're going to fall to the lowest level of your training. So if you're somebody that's never trained and all you did was learn how to press the trigger, you didn't learn how to aim properly, you didn't learn like how to be under stress and to do what you need to do, then you're just going to press the trigger and you may or may not hit the target and you may not even press the trigger. You may freeze, right? Because you haven't trained. It's all about the nervous system, right? It's not personal, it's biology. So you have to train your biology to be capable in those situations. It's like animals. There are certain animals that get put into a corner and they fight back, and there's certain animals that get put into a corner and play dead. Like
oh, interesting.
our our biology, based upon our who we are as people, our experiences, everything, can dictate how we're going to respond in this situation. Um, and that's why it's important to understand. So safety, comfort and safety is a dangerous misconception. People, and I know that I came from a family like that, where at times we would live with this misconception that, oh, we're comfortable, so we're safe. Neighborhoods, right? Like high-end neighborhoods. Comfort and safety is a dangerous misconception.
For sure, for sure.
Evil looks for people who aren't looking for it. And when you're in a safe environment, like, sorry to bring it up, but even that Christian school yesterday.
They were in the middle of praying and he barricaded the doors and just started shooting into the window. He threw a smoke bomb in to cause confusion, but he barricaded them in. But he was just shooting through the window and they had just started to pray. Yeah. But I'm sure I would be willing to bet
Yeah.
not a single person there was armed or if he had come in because most people aren't and they don't want guns at school, but it's happening so much. I don't know about teachers being armed because there's been a discussion of that, but somebody I would be willing to bet not a single person there had a gun on them. I don't know, but
Well, and see, that's the part that frustrates me is there's going to be a scream of gun control. There's going to be groups demanding gun control, and it's funny because we already have gun control, but somehow this kid managed to get his hands on a gun. Like people who have ill intent are always going to get their hands on the devices that are going to do evil. It doesn't even matter if it's this. Like evil is going to do evil regardless of your laws. And that's my frustration is it's like, man, we need to be equipping these teachers. We need to bring guns into school because if we would start treating things and treating guns as a normalization of our society, that stuff would happen less because people would be there to take it out the moment it set foot in there. We need to have, armed security guards in our schools, but trained ones. We need to have teachers trained. We need to have people equipped to see these things and not do, we don't live in the same world that we did 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
I think
I'm
about that
42.
all the time because there was nothing like this. I graduated in like 1984. There was the worst thing, we had a gal kill herself, suicide. That was pretty sad, but there wasn't anything like this. It was just a completely, and I think about those little kids and the trauma that will live with them and how it just, I know from being in a couple armed robberies, and that was much later, it just changes you. You're scared. Like, I see a lot of people are leaving California and going to beautiful rural areas like where you live. I don't know if you're in a rural, but one of my closest friends just moved back to Charlotte. I'm hoping he'll get to meet you, but
That'd
but
be awesome.
when I see it because of what I've been through, like I guess I feel like it kind of turned me into a scaredy cat because as beautiful as these rural areas are, I think Like I would ne one another friend of mine just moved to somewhere in North Carolina, even way more rural, like she's on a well and all that. But when I saw her house, I thought to myself, like I'd never be walking down a country road by myself. I'd be too scared in today's world that I'd be murdered or raped. Like I'm a city girl. I can't be as beautiful as it is, but it's probably the robberies. Like if I had never been the victim of a violent crime, maybe I wouldn't, because lots of people live in beautiful rural areas, and I did in my 20s, but now that I'm in my late 50s, I would not be in, anywhere by myself like that or rural. But I
Well,
would
it's
like,
and it's hard.
but I'd love, in one of your discussions that I heard, you were talking about that it could be a spiritual thing. I guess I kind of like to, because I had never heard that before. Let's close with those, what you mean by that, and anything else that you'd like to just kind of have our guest or listeners, parting thoughts, and then
Yeah, so it goes back to what I say that it's not just about guns for me. I've been on an incredible journey with my spirituality, going from wanting to be an evangelist to super religious to walking away from everything to being suicidal to going through what's called the dark night of the soul to coming out of that to finding true connection to God, like true source connection, and um I look at things like from a very deep perspective. Like I said, I study Vedic astrology, and that's a fun thing to study because it takes the personal out of it. It's not personal, it's energy. It's stuff that was set in motion before you were ever born. It's fun to learn to navigate spirituality from that point of view. And so when I use guns or even the situational awareness stuff, my work is to tap people back into the love of themselves, right? To tap them back into their authenticity. And authenticity is the greatest force of energy on the face of the planet because that's genuine self-love. We talk about how love is the greatest energy in the world, but I believe it's authenticity because when you're truly living authentic to yourself, you are madly in love with who you are. You're honoring the divine feminine. You're honoring the divinity that you're here to be when you're authentically being you. And a lot of that comes through overcoming your fears, tapping into personal confidence, and doing things that allow you to rise up inside. And for a woman, being able to know that you can protect yourself. I love men and I love the masculine. Like, I am not a feminist. I do not bash men. They have a very specific place in our world. But yet, I know as a single woman that I have had to overcome a lot to learn to provide for myself and my kids as a single mom, to protect myself and my children as a single mom, and to be able to nourish and nurture myself as a single mom. And so for me, that's where the journey becomes very spiritual. Because if I can help you overcome trauma that's stuck in your nervous system, that's stuck in your brain, and we can begin to free that trauma and free that energy and help you move through life and learn how to cope with life, give you coping mechanisms so that you can learn how to self-soothe, then you're going to tap into a deeper realm of your spirituality than you've ever known. Because it really is about your journey, right? It's about experience. Like that's all life is. Life is us here having experiences that develop us and make us fall. How would you say that? It would, sorry, truck outside being really loud. I tell people that life is it's kind of like sculptors, right? So when you look at how sculptures were made back in the day, they would take this giant slab of rock, and the artist would look at it, and he wouldn't know what the rock was. He couldn't creatively say it's going to be this. He would have to take the chisel and start chiseling away at the rock, and he would make passes at the rock. And as the rock broke away, he would then get to see that the rock held the artwork inside that the rock was supposed to be. So the rock would speak to him as it let go of the
Oh,
pieces. So
okay.
I tell people that we're the rock,
Okay.
that the craftsman is life, and the chisel is experience. And we have to be unafraid to take the experiences in life, because all of the experiences we go through are chiseling away at the layers of rock that we have become in life through family and trauma and everything else. And it's those experiences, if we allow it, if we relax and we release to the experiences and we learn from the experiences and we don't resist them and hate them and stay bitter at them, then those experiences chip away at the false stuff on the outside, and it leaves the beautiful form of artwork that we've always been. We just had to uncover it. And experience in life is what helps us uncover who we really are, And that's all life is. That's why, to me, like, you can't hate firearms, You can't hate people's ability to protect themselves. You can't hate people that don't want to have a firearm. I respect people that don't want to have a firearm because I understand. And it's just, you got to take the ride. You got to have the experience and, you know, do our best to overcome our obstacles.
Well, I tell you, I hope that we are. I love it's really nice, the beautiful way to end on those sentiments. And I hope that we are meeting in person one of these days, whether I'm there or
That'd
you.
be awesome.
Well, I so appreciate your time again, Hannah. And I'm going
You
to,
too. And if you're ever out here and want to take firearms training, you let me know. That'd
oh,
be
oh,
awesome.
oh.